everybody, my name is Death Control, and in this video, I'm going to explain in detail the speedrun mechanics of Donkey Kong Country on the Game Boy Color. This game is quite unique and differs greatly from the other two versions of the game on Super Nintendo and Game Boy Advance. I discovered most of these mechanics myself while working on the Any% task for this game. If you haven't seen that yet, you should check it out. I'll leave a link in the description. I also wrote a full document about the task, which contains all the tech info presented here, so if you'd like to see that in text format, you can find the link to that in the description as well. So with that, let's get into it. The first thing I'd like to talk about is the basic movement mechanics and the differences between the Kongs. Donkey and Diddy are pretty balanced in this game. Both characters have the same walking, running, and air speeds. Donkey is bigger and heavier, while Diddy is smaller, floatier, and jumps slightly higher. In water levels, Diddy swims about 20% faster for some reason, so you definitely don't want to be Donkey underwater. Both characters start their rolls at the exact same speed, but Diddy preserves his speed slightly better, although the difference is very minor. Diddy is the optimal choice for most of the run, but Donkey isn't really that bad, and he has a few specific applications throughout the run. Speaking of rolls, rolling is quite overpowered in this game. As with all Donkey Kong games, you can jump out of rolls even in midair, which makes roll jumping the most flexible type of movement. Mastering it is key for success in this game, both casually and in the speedrun. The base rolling speed is about 37% faster than running, and rolls last for an incredibly long time. By hitting enemies, you can speed up and extend your rolls to last even longer. Therefore, the general strategy is to roll as much as possible and hit everything you can. There are many interesting and technical details and limitations to how rolls work, and that's what I'm going to spend most of the time talking about in this video. Let's start by talking about dead rolls. Dead rolling is a phenomenon that exists in many of the classic DKC games. If you do a full roll and let it end naturally on the ground without jumping out of it, I call this a rollover. Sometimes when you roll over, the game will give you a dead roll where you get stuck in place for 10 frames and are unable to move or jump. This is obviously slow, and as speedrunners we generally want to avoid it. However, the game has a forgiveness mechanic in place which allows you to roll over without getting dead rolls, and understanding it opens up lots of possibilities to different types of movement options and strats. I call this mechanic stamina. Let's take a look at how it works. I've put the memory variable for stamina up on screen. As you can see, it's currently 0, which represents full stamina. If I now do a full roll and roll over, I won't get a dead roll, but my stamina will be set to 10, representing depleted stamina. If I keep holding B and running and jumping around, my stamina will stay at 10. If I release B and stand still or walk, it will decrease by 1 on each frame until it's back at 0. Now I can roll over again without getting a dead roll. However, if I try to roll over without recovering all my stamina, I'll get a dead roll and won't be able to move for 10 frames. Not only that, but my stamina will be set back to 10, meaning it's fully depleted again. The only way to recover stamina is by walking or standing still with B released. Being in any other state, such as jumping, crouching, holding ropes, being in barrel cannons, or transforming into animal buddies, will not recover stamina. You can think of your stamina as a resource at your disposal. Whenever you roll over, you don't have to take your 10 walking frames immediately nor sequentially. Rollovers can be very useful, you just have to remember to pay for them by taking 10 walking frames sometime in between. Since humans aren't perfect, you'll usually be refilling at least a few frames of stamina between landing from a jump and pressing B to roll again, so if your rollovers are far enough apart in a level, you probably won't really even need to think about it. You can also recover stamina for free while waiting for something like a swinging rope or moving platform. Also, stamina is automatically refilled between level and bonus transitions, so you can freely burn it before exiting a level. A good way to get a feel for stamina is to clear out all the enemies in jungle hijinks and just roll walk around until you find the timing needed to not dead roll. You can also grab the BizHawk emulator, open RamWatch, and add the memory variable 0836 like I did here to see exactly how it works. And in fact, on flat ground, walking to connect rolls is actually slightly faster on average than jumping out of rolls, so it's a good technique to practice. This advantage is especially magnified in ice levels where you can slide across the ground while walking and preserve even more speed. Now that we know how stamina works, let's talk about another important mechanic, buffering. Buffering means pressing a button early in order to cause the action to occur on the first possible frame. This game features several buffering mechanics which may honestly be a bit annoying and unpredictable to casual players, but can be incredibly useful to speedrunners. I've enabled my input display so you can see which buttons I'm pressing in order to understand how buffering works. First, you can buffer rolls out of rolls. By releasing and repressing B during a roll, you will cause a new roll to start immediately after the current one ends. As long as you have full stamina, you won't dead roll in between. You can also buffer rolls anytime you're in the spinning state, which occurs after bouncing enemies or getting shot out of barrel cannons. If you press and hold B while spinning, you'll roll the moment you touch the ground. This is often useful, since rolling is optimal, but if you want to prevent this for any reason, you must hold B before going into the spinning state and continue holding it until you land. Finally, you can buffer rolls out of crawl spaces, which allows you to start moving as early as possible. Note that you can't buffer rolls out of regular jumps. This feature is useful if you want to hold B to run without rolling. Simply jump first, then press and hold B in the air. Be aware that you can buffer jumps out of jumps as long as you get a fresh A press in the air. This generally isn't very useful, but it's something to be aware of to prevent it from happening on accident. I mentioned earlier that you can extend your rolls by hitting enemies. Let's talk about how that works. A normal roll lasts for 47 frames. On the final frame, the game checks to see if the extend conditions are met. If they are, the Kong will enter an extended roll, which lasts for an additional 42 frames for Diddy and 40 frames for Donkey. Let's take a look at what those conditions are. The most natural way to get an extended roll is by rolling through an enemy. If you hit an enemy, your roll will speed up, and if you continue holding B through the entire roll, you'll enter an extended roll upon reaching the end frame. During this extended roll, you can hit another enemy and speed up again, and as long as you're still holding B, the roll will be able to extend again. This can be done repeatedly, but keep in mind that you have to hit a new enemy during each extended roll segment in order to keep extending. You can't hit two enemies during one segment and have the roll extend twice. The next method to get an extended roll is to simply be airborne on the roll's end frame. This will cause a roll to extend automatically even if no enemy was hit. I call this technique a ledge extend since it can be abused to get extended rolls by intentionally positioning rolls to end after falling off a ledge. You can combine these techniques to create massive extended rolls and pull off cool strats which are unique to this version of the game. There's another interesting aspect of extended rolls related to buried treasure. Scattered throughout the game are hidden items, including barrels, Kong letters, and animal tokens in marked places, as well as bananas and secret sticker books in various unmarked locations. These items can be uncovered by landing on them from a high enough height, and additionally, the hidden items can be revealed with DK's hand slap. Normally, if you jump on buried treasure, you will bounce off the ground and be put into either the spinning state or the walking state. However, if you're rolling and happen to fall on the treasure from a sufficient height, the game will treat it as a rolling hit and give you a boosted and extended roll as if you had hit an enemy. I like to call this phenomenon a box boost, and it's useful in a surprising number of places to get additional roll boosts and go even faster. Remember how I said that you can't hit two enemies during a single segment of a roll and get the roll to extend twice? That's because the game keeps track of whether or not to give you an extended roll by storing a variable which I refer to as the extended roll credit. When you reach the end of a roll, if you have the credit, the game will spend it for you in order to give you an extended roll, and you can't have more than one credit. However, if you hit an enemy, or box, to get an extended roll credit, and then either jump out of the roll before reaching the end frame, or release B and roll over, the credit won't be spent and you can actually save it for later. This means you can start up a fresh roll and simply hold B to get an extended roll without hitting an enemy or going over a ledge. This is a technique which I like to call extended roll storage. Stored extended rolls, like stamina, are another resource at your disposal which can be used to create new strats and route options. I've put the memory variable 082E on screen, which displays 64 when I have an extended roll credit. Since hitting enemies also speeds up rolls, it's usually better to go into extended rolls immediately rather than saving them for later when possible. However, if there's no room to do so, you can keep the stored extended roll and use it later. Be aware that ledge extends, while not requiring an extended roll credit, will consume the credit if you have it. There's another funny technicality to extended rolls, which is that after you enter an extended roll, your hit priority changes from your rolling hit priority to your jumping hit priority for some unknown reason. For Diddy, this is a pure nerf, since it means he'll get bounced back by clumps if he isn't in a fresh roll. For DK, however, this is actually a buff, since it makes it possible for him to roll through curled up armies, and that's right, also green crushes. I refer to this mechanic as a Krusha Roll, and it actually makes DK quite useful in a few places, including rolling through the clumps in jungle hijinks, and rolling through the crushes in manic mincers. The next mechanic is a simple one. This is reversing. You can press in the opposite direction during a roll and switch directions. This resets your speed to the initial rolling speed, so you generally want to avoid doing it after getting boosted rolls through enemies. Reversing will also consume your extended roll credit if you have one. Finally, we've arrived at what is in my opinion one of the coolest and most unique mechanics in the game. When starting a roll, the camera will shift forwards and lock into position in order to help you see the level in front of you, with forwards being defined as whatever direction you are facing before starting the roll. However, if you then change directions, either on the first frame of the roll or by reversing, this forwards position doesn't update and the camera will be stuck behind you. This causes the character to roll to the far edge of the screen. Welcome to camera locking. But aside from making it hard to see ahead of you, what makes this mechanic useful? The key lies in how the game spawns entities. The DKC games are known for having local cycles, where entities only spawn when you get sufficiently close to them. This means that no matter if you rush through a level, or move slowly and take your time, when arriving at a new obstacle, the enemies, ropes, and platforms will always start in the same position. For certain obstacles, you may have to wait, and there's no way to avoid this just by going faster and arriving earlier. But what if you could change the position of these entities by simply changing when they spawn? This is precisely the value of camera locking, because spawning isn't actually based on the player's position, but rather based on the camera's position. This means that when the player is rolling forward with the camera locked behind, upcoming entities will spawn later relative to the player's position, since the camera is further behind than it normally would be. This creates another possible cycle which can be used in any situation where it would be advantageous. For example, this can be used to stall moving ropes or platforms to allow you to jump across without waiting for them to arrive and turn around. This can also be used to move enemies like zingers or mincers out of the way of the optimal path so you can continue moving forward without hitting them. Conversely, this can be used to prevent jumping critters from bouncing away so you can roll through them before they leave the ground. Camera locking can even be used against Mankey to plow through him before he throws his barrel. But be aware that for some reason camera locking does not work against Mini Neki. He seems to be the only enemy in the game who reacts to the player's position instead of the camera's position, and if you try to approach him with a camera locked roll, he'll blast you in the face with a nut. Needless to say, camera locking is a valuable technique to learn, and it has many cool applications throughout the run. That about covers it for the main rolling mechanics, but there are some other various features that I'd like to talk about. The first is an interesting abuse of the game's standard downwards acceleration, which can normally vary during jumps to give you some control over your jump height. The jump arc in this game is a simple parabola. Jumping gives you an initial upward speed, and then you accelerate downwards at a rate of 128 subpixels, or half a pixel, per frame squared on every frame after that. The only control you have over your jump arc is by holding A, which functions by simply reducing this acceleration to 80 subpixels, or just under a third of a pixel, per frame squared. Once A is released, normal acceleration is applied, and low gravity cannot be regained by pressing A again in the air. However, if you hold A through the entire jump and continue holding it until you land, something interesting happens. This is where gravity glitch comes into play. If you hold A through a full jump until landing back on the ground, the gravity variable 0818 will not be properly reset to its normal value of 128. This low gravity state will persist after releasing A, which means you can now run around with low gravity. But most importantly, the low gravity state will be maintained through the next roll, giving you a floaty roll. This can be used to cross wider gaps and create skip options which can save a bit of time, such as jumping off of moving platforms early or connecting rolls across descending platforms. Gravity glitch applies to minecarts and animal buddies too. Be aware that you can't set up gravity glitch from bounces off enemies, since the spinning state will automatically give you low gravity and restore normal gravity when you land. Keep in mind that gravity glitch doesn't reduce your max falling speed, just your downwards acceleration. Holding A also makes Rambi's midair buck much more floaty, essentially allowing it to be used like a double jump. Now, everyone knows that switching characters is slow. Although it's quite a bit faster in this game than in other DKC games, it still costs about half a second. But fortunately, there's a way to switch without losing any time. Unfortunately, it happens to be frame perfect. If you hit select on the same frame you touch a bonus transition or level exit, the character swap will happen during the fade out. Of course, I decided to call this bug Switch Glitch. This is a neat little trick which is shown off in the task, and although it's pretty hard to hit, it may someday be useful in individual world speedruns, and it can be a harmless thing to go for if you're in a situation where you need to swap and have a transition coming up. There are some other weird things that can happen if you try to swap Kongs on the same frame as something else happening, but I haven't explored it much yet. This would be a good place to look if any glitch hunters out there are interested in trying to find a new way to break this game. I also want to talk a bit about Enguarde, and although this isn't specifically tech, there are a few helpful things to know about optimizing his movement. Enguarde is really fast, making him pretty much necessary for water levels, but his acceleration is really low, making him feel slippery and hard to control. Since you can't get Enguarde back after getting hit, losing him can be worse than taking a death. The animal buddy boxes do respawn though, so you can go back to fetch him again if you're close. Whatever speed you have when you enter the box will be transferred, so you can gain some initial upward speed in Coral Capers by jumping into the box. When transitioning from horizontal to vertical, you want to start moving as early as possible and not bonk the ceiling or floor. Bonking walls horizontally doesn't matter since these won't take your speed away, but most of your horizontal movement is going to come down to stab chains. Stabs cannot be buffered, which is why I like to roll across both buttons to ensure that if I accidentally press the first button too early, that I've got a backup press to still get the stab. It may be convenient to know that stabbing works on sort of a frame rule. The cooldown can only end on one specific frame of Enguarde's 5-frame animation cycle, which means you have a 5-frame window after each stab to initiate the next stab and not lose any time, since it will still end at the same time. Oh yeah, and Enguarde is actually faster in Croctopus Chase. He saves 2 seconds in the task, and around 1 second RTA depending on how good your movement is with him. Another miscellaneous topic to mention is how to optimize the minecart levels. The movement in minecart carnage is actually kinda interesting. Going uphill slows you down, and going downhill speeds you up. Jumping preserves your current speed, which means that the main strategy is to jump up the uphills and off the downhills, but your speed is automatically lowered the moment you land, which means you can't bunny hop.
In Minecart Madness, jumping does nothing to change your speed except slow you down slightly, so you basically want to jump as little as possible. Also, take this first bonus, it saves time even at 90%.
There's another subtle thing to know about level transitions, which is that if you're collecting bananas while entering a transition, the fade out will be delayed until the bananas are done collecting. I call this getting banana blocked, and it can lose up to half a second in spots like before the ropey rampage bonus where it's unavoidable. In other places, like the end of Rope Bridge Rumble or before the bonuses in Minecart Madness or Blackout Basement, it can save some frames to dodge the bananas before the transition to avoid getting banana blocked. One final thing to talk about is a couple different interactions with the Gnawty bosses. On Really Gnawty, you can skip one of his attack phases by taking damage. Since the final attack phase is the longest, this is the best place to take the damage boost. Simply run directly into him immediately after dealing him the 4th hit. On both Gnawty bosses, you can score a quick kill by getting the final hit immediately after he finishes his 4th invulnerable phase, before he leaves the ground again. This causes the victory fanfare to start immediately instead of it being delayed until after Gnawty goes through his defeat animation and collapses. This saves about 3.5 seconds, and I would typically reset if I miss it in World 1. It's a 5-frame window to hit, and it can become pretty consistent with practice. I like to use an audio cue where I do a full height jump immediately after the 3rd squeak. And that about covers it. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. I hope this video was able to convince you that there's more to this game than just janky controls and some 8-bit slap tracks. I'd be really excited to see some new runners get into this game, and if you have any questions about anything discussed here, feel free to ask and I'd be happy to clarify. Now that you know how everything works, see how much you can spot.